everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going over the most adorable little crossbody. It is so stinking cute. It is the Call Me Crossbody from Sewn Ideas. Now this crossbody, look at this. It's small, but it's mighty. It is the perfect, I don't need much more than my wallet, my phone, the bare essentials, and that's all. I don't want to carry the giant tote. I don't want to carry the backpack because if I carry those big bags, I'm gonna end up putting a bunch of other stuff in them that I don't need. This is just I'm going to the grocery store, just going to the theme parks, going somewhere that I don't need a lot of stuff. So this bag, you can see this version I made first. This is an all vinyl version. The pattern actually calls for a tongue lock right here, but I want you to get creative with this flap if you don't have that. For example, when I first made this bag, I didn't have the tongue lock. So instead I used a little twist lock here. So I can twist it, open it up just like that. You could also use magnetic snap here. You could use rivet snaps, just like plastic snaps here if you want. There's a lot of options for this, so I want you to get creative. In today's tutorial, I am gonna show you how to do a twist lock and the tongue lock, and I'm gonna give you a couple of little tips if you wanna use magnets, but really you can play around with this and you can pretty much use whatever you have. So when we open up the flap, we have this adorable little pocket on the front right here. I chose to put my bag tag right here on the front. You can put your bag tag wherever you want. So as you can see, when I open it up, I have my everyday wallet. This is actually my everyday bag now. I've been carrying this bag around for a couple weeks, but this is my everyday wallet that I purchased. I did not make this, but it fits it perfectly. Inside, you just have a nice big opening, and then you have a cell phone pocket. So for example, here is my cell phone, and it's a big iPhone, and it fits in there just perfectly. It's got that whole little holder on the back. It's bulky, but it fits in that pocket perfectly. Now, this is optional, but it's one of my favorite parts about the bag. If you turn the bag around, on the back, you have a little secret zipper here. Open that up, and now you have another pocket. So this is where I would put, if I wasn't carrying my wallet, I'd put my credit cards in here. I would put my ID in here. Something close to your body, especially if you're in eventually if you're in a more crowded touristy area and you're worried about being pickpocketed, you want to keep things close to your body. So this is where I'd put those items. I just love this cute little bag. It's got a little handle on top, which is again, totally optional. And then the crossbody strap, which is so cute. It's two-tone, so you can see on this one, I did wax canvas on one side, quilt cotton on the other. It's adorable. You guys are gonna love this one. This is another one of those bags where you can make it easier if the pattern seems a little challenging. Maybe skip this pocket. This is the only zipper on the bag. This part right here is the only zipper. So if you're not feeling it, skip it. You can probably skip this front pocket if you wanted to do just like a snap or something on the exterior, and then you can just snap it down. So have fun with this pattern. It's a really, really fun one to build on. So you can see in this version here, I used vinyl, and I used some of this beautiful vinyl that's a little bit thicker. So because it's like that, I didn't actually have to interface it. The pattern calls for fusible fleece. I did not use any interfacing at all on this, except for the quilt cotton lining. For the lining, I did use quilt cotton, and for that, I used woven fuse, so that woven interfacing just to keep it from stretching, keep it from fraying, and just to beef it up a little bit. But that's it. So in today's tutorial, we will be using fusible fleece. I have a second bag that I will kind of be popping in and out as we go through to just show you some other methods. On that second one, I'm using Decoville Light. Again, use what you have. If you don't have fusible fleece, use what you have. If you have a really heavy duty vinyl or a thicker material, you probably don't need to add anything. So thank you so much to Vivi, as always, for allowing me to film tutorials using your amazing patterns. We know how much I love. She has the dog walking bag that so many of you guys have made. It's that crossbody bag. It's really thin, and it has the grommet. I'll have a link for it. It is such a good bag, especially if you're a newer sewer. You're gonna love that one. And then we also did the beauty makeup bag, which is just beautiful. So if you haven't already checked out Sewn Ideas website, make sure you go over there and do that. Occasionally, I have a discount code, so I will put it down below with the expiration date. So if you have time, go grab it at a discount. All right. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. We have sewing tutorials every Monday, all kinds of other tutorials in other days of the week. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything at all you want to say, leave them down in the comment section down below. At the very top of the comment section will be a comment from me with timestamps for every single part of this video. So if there's just one step you're interested in, go click on that timestamp and it'll take you straight there in the video. I will also have links for pretty much everything you see. So if there's an item you're looking for, check the description of this video and there will be links directing you straight to the item. All right, let's get started. Okay, so for this version, I'm going to be using quilt cotton for the lining, a little bit of waterproof canvas for some pockets, and then I have this canvas material from Hawthorne Supply Company for the exterior of the bag. From the outer fabric, you're going to need 1 yard. From your lining fabric, you're also going to need 1 yard. Now you can see I'm kind of mixing it up with a couple different cuts here. So I have a 1/2 yard and a fat quarter bundle. And the big reason you want to use a yard from your lining fabric is for the strap. So whatever you're going to be using for the strap, you need a nice long cut. Now you can use whatever material you like for the exterior of the bag. For my first bag, I used a kind of a heavier vinyl, which turned out beautifully. However, it's going to be easier if you use a lighter weight fabric. So you could use just quilt cotton and you would be fine. However, I would go with something just a little bit more durable. So something like this canvas material, this is a lighter weight canvas to be honest, and this is going to work perfectly for our exterior. It's gonna make sewing those curves a lot easier. Next, we have our interfacing. You're gonna want around 2 yards of your woven interfacing. It really depends on what material you're using. If you're using vinyl and waterproof canvas, you might not use any of this. If you're using a lot of quilt cotton, you're gonna want a lot of the woven interfacing. I will be using the woven interfacing on all of the lining quilt cotton pieces, and I'll also be using it on my canvas exterior piece just to beef it up a little bit more. Next, you're gonna want about a 1/2 yard of fusible fleece. Again, you could get away with other things here. You could use Decovil Light. If you're using a firmer material, for example, that vinyl I showed you in the beginning of the video, that vinyl is very firm. It doesn't need any more interfacing. So the flimsier the material, the more interfacing you want to use. The beefier the material, the less you really need to use. So for this tutorial though today, we're going to be using the woven interfacing and the fusible fleece. So here are some of the other pieces you're going to need for the bag today. Today we're going to be using this tongue lock. Now this is a 1 inch wide tongue lock. You see it goes just like that. As I showed you in the beginning, I'm also going to show you how to install a turn lock. So a turn lock has your little, exterior piece here and it pops out just like that. So I will show you how to install both of these today. You're going to need 2 1 inch swivel hooks and 1 1 inch slider. This is going to be for your crossbody strap. And then you're going to want 2 3/4 inch D-rings. Now, I don't have D-rings in this color, so today I'm using these cute triangle rings. Optional, but always adds a nice little decorative element, are some rivets. And then there's that adorable back pocket zipper. It is completely optional. You can skip it if you want, but I think it's worth the trouble of making it. So you're going to need some zipper tape and a zipper pull or a 9-inch zipper. Now, I already have some piping made. You don't have to use piping on this. I know a lot of you guys asked me about that. Do you have to use piping on the flap? No, you do not. You can skip the piping. I already made one without piping. I'll show you that in just a moment. However, if you want to make piping, I'm going to have a link down in the description of the video for a tutorial showing you how to make this. I'm not actually going to be making it today. I'm not the biggest fan of piping, but I am going to show you how to add it to the bag. There is a fantastic tutorial I will link down below showing you how to make piping in different sizes. Also, let's quickly talk needles and thread. If you're using quilt cotton and cotton canvas, things like that, material that's not super thick, you can go ahead and use a Microtex 8012 needle. If you're using thicker vinyl and like waterproof canvas, the heavy duty stuff, go ahead and step it up to a 9014. On the bag I showed you in the beginning of the video, I did use a 9014. It was necessary. For my top thread, I'm using Amara 70 weight, which is just a really nice polyester thread that's a little bit thicker. And then for the bobbin, I'm using Amara 100, also polyester thread, but it's thin enough to work really well in my bobbin. Okay, here's all the other stuff you might find useful today. Fabric scissors, of course. Always Beacon 301 glue. I just like to have it because you don't really know when you're going to need it. So just have it. Just always have it out ready to go. I also like to use this masking tape to hold down pockets, things that we don't want to pin necessarily, but we need to hold down in place. This masking tape works great. Some 1/4 inch double-sided tape that's easy to sew over, so the Dritz brand is great for that. This is my favorite turning tool. I really, really love it. I'll have a link for it down below. A seam ripper and stiletto. 3 different marking tools, one for marking on vinyl, which we're probably not going to need today, but this also works really well on waterproof canvas, one that is an air erasing marker, and then a chalk marker. It's always nice to have options, a healthy amount of clips. All right, let's go through all the pattern pieces, starting with pattern piece 1. This is your main body. This is what you're going to be seeing the most of. You're going to have 2 exterior pieces. Now, these are both that canvas material. One of these pieces will have a pocket covering it, so make sure you think about that when you're picking out pattern placement. Both of these I have interfaced with woven interfacing. With cotton canvas, you don't need to, but canvas does have a tendency to fray, and that woven interfacing really helps with that. And then you're also going to have these smaller cuts of fusible fleece fused onto the back. So when you look at your pattern piece, you have the exterior cut around the solid line, and then you have this dash line. What I do is I take a seam ripper and just kind of notch in around that dash line, and then I just trace in there for my fusible fleece cuts. That way your fusible fleece cuts are smaller than your exterior cuts because you don't really want to be sewing through all this. You can do the exact same thing if you're using Decoville Light, or if you're using a thicker vinyl, you can just skip the fusible fleece altogether. You're going to also have 2 cuts of lining fabric from that pattern piece. Both of these are already interfaced with my woven interfacing. Quick note, when you're interfacing your fusible fleece to your panels, make sure you only interface it to one of your exterior panels. Leave the other piece of fusible fleece for later. So only interface one of your panels. This is going to be your front panel. Only interface that front panel with the fusible fleece. For the side panel, you're going to have the same thing, 2 cuts of lining that are interfaced with your woven interfacing if it's quilt cotton. And then your exterior pieces, both of these have the woven interfacing and the smaller cuts of fusible fleece. And then the bottom panel, you're going to have 1 cut of exterior fabric with that smaller cut of fusible fleece and a lining cut. Both my pieces are interfaced with the woven interfacing. All right, here are the next pattern pieces. Pattern piece number 4 is your flap. This is just going to be, the flap that comes down. You're going to have 1 cut of exterior fabric interfaced with woven interfacing and fusible fleece, if that's the route you're taking. And then a cut of lining fabric that I have interfaced with woven interfacing. Next, you're going to have your tongue lock and flap. So now I haven't actually used this yet, but I'm going to be using waterproof canvas here. That might not be the best decision. I was thinking I want something a little bit sturdier, but turning this out could be difficult. So while we're working on this, I might switch up the fabric for this, but we're going to try it with waterproof canvas. Pattern piece number 6 is that open front pocket on the front of your bag. I'm using waterproof canvas for that just because it's a little bit more sturdy. Since I'm using waterproof canvas, I don't have it interfaced with anything. If you're using quilt cotton, I would interface it with the woven interfacing. Next, we have our strap connectors. These are going to be what hold the D-rings on the side. I always suggest beefing these up a little bit. I know it's tempting to just use like kind of a flimsy piece of quilt cotton here, but these are going to be what take the most beating on the bag because the strap is going to be tugging on these all the time. So I'm using waterproof canvas since it is so sturdy, but if you were using quilt cotton, just make sure you add some woven interfacing to it. Next is optional, but it is the top handle, that adorable little handle that goes on the top. It's completely optional. Honestly, if you didn't put it on the bag, you wouldn't lose much, but it is very cute. All right, pattern piece 9 is that phone pocket. This actually goes inside the bag. This is a fun one to use a contrasting fabric on. It doesn't have to be waterproof canvas. Quilt cotton would be fine. If you're using quilt cotton, make sure you add that woven interfacing. I am using waterproof canvas though. Just give it a little pop. After that is the zipper strap. Now, to be honest, this isn't really seen, so I would just use 1 piece of quilt cotton here and really whatever you want. This is going to be to help with that zipper on the back pocket. If you're not doing the zipper on the back of the bag, then just skip this. You don't need it. Also to go with that zipper is the zipper pocket. So from this, I have 1 piece of quilt cotton that is interfaced with my woven interfacing. Pattern piece 12 is going to be your binding. Like I said, I'm using binding that I made long ago, but this is optional. And then you have your crossbody strap. We're going to do a 2-tone crossbody strap today. So I have a couple cuts of quilt cotton here. You can see I have 2 that I'm going to sew together to make a nice long strap. And then for the other side of the strap, I have a long cut of my waterproof canvas. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is add that adorable little pocket on the back of our bag. Like I said, this is optional. Go ahead and skip this if you don't want to do it today. This is the only zipper in the bag. So for that, you're going to need your little zipper flap. You're going to need the back exterior panel of your bag, and you're going to need the zipper pocket as well as your zipper. So first take your zipper flap, and on the wrong side, let's just fold these right sides together, matching up the short edges just like that. And then right along the middle, let's just pinch that with our fingers. And then use any sort of fabric marking tool and mark right on that middle. We're trying to find the midpoint of this. There we go. So I have it like that. And you can do the same with it hot dog style if you like, or you can just kind of eyeball this. What we're gonna do is we're gonna mark a rectangle on the back of this, and we want it as centered as possible. But like I said, this doesn't really get seen in the end, so it doesn't have to be exact. So what we wanna do is draw a rectangle that is about 6 inches wide and 3/8 of an inch tall. So I have my little 1 inch by 6 inch ruler here. I'm just going to line this up so that the 1/4 inch mark going this way horizontally covers my midpoint mark, and my 3 inch mark is also on that midpoint mark. So that midpoint mark I made previously, I have my 3 inch and 1/4 inch grid lines intersecting right over it. And then I'm just gonna trace along the long top edge. So that gives me 6 inches. I can go down on the sides just a little bit. And now I'm just gonna raise up my ruler, and I'm gonna measure 3/8 of an inch down from that top line. There we go. So that top line is in the same spot as my 3/8 of an inch tick marks. And then I'm gonna draw the bottom line. There's lots of templates out there you can use. There's lots of other options for this, but you just want a 3/8 of an inch by about 6 inches. And then use your ruler to find the midpoint. Draw a middle line like that, and then draw some triangles that extend anywhere from 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch in. I completely eyeball this. There we go. All right, so we have our rectangle marked on the back of our zipper strap. Now grab your back exterior panel and lay it right side up. And you're gonna line up your zipper strap right side facing down, going vertical just like your outer panel, and it's gonna be 3/8 of an inch in from this right side. There we go. And I completely eyeball centering it, vertically. I measure in 3/8 of an inch, and then I just look at it and make sure it's centered. It shouldn't be too hard. There's not a lot of space on the top and the bottom. If you want, you can use some pins here. If you're using material that you don't feel comfortable pinning, go ahead and use tape to hold this in place. You could also use clips. Okay, so now let's take this to the sewing machine. And what you want to do is you want to sew around this outer portion of your rectangle here in the middle. One of the tricks I've seen a lot of people doing lately, and I do like it, is instead of sewing around all 4 edges of this marked rectangle here, we're only going to sew along the long edges. So we're going to start here, we're going to back stitch at the beginning and the end, then we're just going to skip over the short edges, and then again back stitch, sew along the long edge, and back stitch. It helps the rectangle be a little bit more clean on the front. So that's what I've been doing lately. You are more than welcome to do whatever you're comfortable with. If you want to sew around all 4 edges, go for it. If you want to try this and you haven't already, go ahead and just sew along only the long edges. Just make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end each time. All right, once you have that sewn in place, you can use your seam ripper to rip along that midpoint mark right in the center of your rectangle, just to get a hole started. And then you can grab some scissors and continue cutting along that midpoint mark all the way till you get to the tip of that triangle that you drew. And then you're gonna follow the diagonal lines of the triangle down right to the corner of your rectangle. So you're gonna get as close as you can to your stitches in the corner of your rectangle, but don't cut them. I know it can be tricky. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now you're gonna push that pocket strap through that rectangle that you just cut, and then pull it down. Now, if you're using fusible fleece here, so I've made this bag. This is the 3rd time I've made this bag, and I just read the instructions that say you're supposed to add the fusible fleece after you add the pocket on. That makes sense, because this is very difficult to do with that fusible fleece. So please don't do what I did. Please don't add this pocket on with the fusible fleece. Add the fusible fleece on after you add the pocket on. But since I already add the fusible fleece, and if you were using thicker material here, you would also have to deal with this being a little bit more challenging. We're just gonna work with it. So I am using clips here to hold this down. If you did not add the fusible fleece or any sort of interfacing here, you can just iron this and press this and it will stay in place. It'll be much easier. Okay, so once I have this pinned so that it's nice and flat around that zipper, what I'm doing is I'm actually just pulling on the fabric so that the seam is nice and straight, and I'm using some of my Scotch tape here to tape down this zipper strap, and then we'll remove the tape later. So you see I'm pulling on this, getting it as straight as possible with the help of my clips, and then I'm going to use the tape to hold it in place just like that, just on the edges. And like I said, we'll remove the tape before we sew it all together. And then you can remove the clips and your seam here should stay pretty straight. All right, there we go. As you can see, I just like put tape all around the edge. I'm not trying to get tape too close to the seam because I don't really want to sew over the tape. It's okay if you do sew over masking tape. It comes out of the stitches really easily. But see, what I'm trying to do right now is get this seam as straight and flat as possible so I can add it to my zipper. This is much easier if you just don't add the fusible fleece, if you just follow the instructions and add the fusible fleece later. However, if you're like me and you make mistakes and you jump ahead, we can still do it. All right, so let's go ahead and put this to the side. So I cut my zipper tape down to about 10.5 inches. Now we're going to take our lining pocket piece here and we're going to lay it right side up. Take your zipper, and when the zipper is closed, it should be going up towards the top. Lay that right side up and then just center it along the left edge over here. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but we do want some overhang on the sides. And then let's just clip that in place. Okay, now we can take this to the sewing machine and baste along this left clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have your zipper basted on, lay it right side up with the zipper on the left. And now take that exterior back panel and we're going to lay it so that the rectangle hole here is on the right. So the exterior panel main part should be going to the left, the pocket should be going to the right. They kind of spread out and the zipper is in the middle. And what we're going to do is we're going to center this over that zipper. Now, if you look at the sides here of your zipper strap, they should line up with the sides of your zipper pocket right here. So let's grab some more tape to help us out here. You can move your zipper pull up and out of the way if you'd like. You can stitch over these ends to make sure your zipper pull doesn't come off, or you can add a clip, whichever you're comfortable with. So I'm going to add the double-sided tape right along the very outer edges of both sides of my zipper, but we're only working on one side to begin with. Okay, so like I said, you want to center your exterior outer panel over your zipper. Remove the paper from the left side of the zipper only, just like that. Now take your exterior panel, do your best to center it over your pocket. Like I said, if you need, and if you're not using all this Scotch tape, this is easier, but the short edges of your zipper strap should line up with the long edges of your zipper pocket. And then once you have it centered, just push it down over the tape. Remember, the tape is only sticky on the left side. We haven't removed the paper for the tape on the right side yet. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch only along this left edge right here on the exterior panel, and it's going to be going through the exterior panel and the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Don't worry about the short ends. Don't worry about the right side. We're only going to do this left side here. Do your best to keep your zipper as straight as possible. All right, once you have that left side top stitched on, flip up the outer panel just a little bit and move down that zipper pull so that it's inside of the pocket opening now, just like that. Now let's flip this whole unit upside down. There we go. So now we're looking at the back of everything. Now you're going to take your pocket and pull all the way to the right, and then you can press along this seam right here, and then take the right edge here, the unsewn edge of your zipper pocket, and fold it up so that the pocket is right side together. And this edge is going to go all the way to the left edge of our zipper tape. And it should all line up nicely. Now you can baste this in place if you'd like, but since I already have my double-sided tape on the other side of my zipper, I'm just going to use double-sided tape here to hold this in place. And I'm going to line it up on the outer edge on the back of my zipper this time on the unsewn side. And then I can remove the paper. Again, I'm only working on the back of my zipper here. And then I can just press this down, again, making sure everything's lined up nicely. We just need to temporarily hold this lining panel to our zipper until we can sew the zipper on properly. So this is another option. You could take this to the machine and baste it down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You could just use pins here. There's a lot of options, but since I've already got the double-sided tape on the other side and I don't want to sew through it with the paper on, I'm just going to use tape here. Now let's flip our whole unit so the exterior is right side out. Give it a good press down. And now we're going to finish sewing around this rectangle. So lift up your exterior outer panel. Remove the paper from the tape that's on the right side of your zipper, just like that. And then just push down the exterior panel. Try to get it as straight and even as possible. There we go. This should be fairly simple if you did not add the fusible fleece. If you added the fusible fleece, we got a mess of tape here, but that's okay. Okay, so now let's take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along the short edge, the long edge, and then the opposite short edge, just finishing up our little rectangle here. All right, we did it. Even though we made it much more difficult than it needed to be, we did it. Let's just go ahead and remove all this tape since we don't need it anymore. Okay, so now we need to close up this pocket back here. She suggests going over this short little side right here once more, just so you get the pocket piece attached to the zipper really well. And then we're gonna go along the sides here, and you wanna get pretty close, go over that little triangle you have right there on your zipper, just go over that. So really, we don't want the pocket to be a lot bigger than this opening right here. So we're gonna go at about 1/8 of an inch right along the edge, just like that. So from the raw edge of your zipper pocket, it could be about 1 inch of a seam allowance, but really you just wanna start at the top. So if you fold the outer panel out and you get it nice and straight, you wanna go at about 1/8 of an inch right next to the edge of your outer panel, just like that. Then do the same thing on the other side. Fold the outer panel back, fold it so it's nice and straight, and then go right against it just like that. We want this pocket to be about the same width as our zipper. We don't want it to be bigger than that. Okay, once you have that pocket sewed, let's just flip the outer panel out of the way so we can see the stitches that we just made on only our pocket. And you're going to use your scissors and cut about 1/4 of an inch to the right of those stitches so that we have 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You're gonna cut off the zipper tape as well. There we go, nice and clean. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, now with your pocket facing up, we're going to stitch a basting stitch right along the left edge here, 1/8 of an inch in from your outer panel. So you should have your pocket overextending just a bit on the side over here. We don't want that. So we're going to baste down the edge of our outer panel to that folded pocket lining right here. We're going to baste down the edge just like that, and then we're gonna trim this off. So now that you have this top stitch down on the left, just grab your scissors and just trim down any overhang from the pocket. So you're not cutting your exterior outer panel, you're only cutting what's hanging over from the lining pocket. And there you go. Isn't that just a cute little zipper on the back? It's not a whole lot of work, especially if you do it the right way. If you waited, like the pattern suggested, and you did not put your fusible fleece on yet, now you can do it. Attach your fusible fleece over the back of this pocket. If you're using Decoville Light, same thing. Attach your interfacing now. If you kind of mucked it up like I did, you should still be okay. You should still be okay. So now you can just take this and put this to the side for a moment. Next up, we're gonna work on that top handle. Again, this is optional. So on the back of the top handle, we're gonna mark a midpoint line. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can definitely just grab an iron and press this with an iron. With waterproof canvas, I can just press it with my fingers since it's a small piece. And then we're gonna take these raw long edges and fold them up wrong sides together to meet that midpoint mark. Here we go. I'm gonna use some clips to hold this, but once again, if you're using material that can use an iron, just press it with your iron. Do the same on the other side. And then fold the whole unit in half so that those raw edges are tucked in, just like that. Nice and clean. Don't worry about folding in these short edges over here. Those will be eaten up in the seam. Okay, now let's take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along both long folded edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And now once you have the top stitching done, grab the back exterior panel, and we're gonna measure in 1.5 inches from the left on the top edge, just like that. Take your handle and lay it so that the short raw edge is up against the top edge and it's pointing down. And the farthest from the center, so the left edge of your strap is up against the tip of your ruler. You know what I'm saying. The left edge of the strap needs to be 1.5 inches from the left edge of your bag. There you go. You can just add a clip here to hold that in place. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and let's just sew this strap end down at 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that end sewn down, we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So we're gonna measure in 1.5 inches from the right side this time along that top edge. Take your strap and then just fold it up so that the right side of the strap now is going to come in 1.5 inches, just like that. There we go. Use clip to hold that in place. And now let's do the same thing. Let's sew this end of the strap down at 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, there you go. This step is optional, but it is really, really cute, especially if you're making this for a younger person in your life. I think this is a nice option. I would add it. So in the next part of the tutorial, she teaches you how to make this. Like I said, I will have a tutorial linked down in the description of this video. It's not one of my tutorials, but it is a very, very good one. It's the one I use when making piping. I do suggest you go give it a watch. If you don't want to make piping, don't. Piping is optional. So now if you are adding piping, go ahead and grab it, and we're going to line it up and clip it down. Let this overhang about 1 inch on the top, and then make sure that the corded side of the piping, so the bubbly side, goes in towards the center of your flap. And then you can just add some clips to hold this in place. And we're going to clip it around the entire outer edge of our flap. Okay, and what you can do is actually cut a couple of little slits down here around the sharp corners. Just cut the slits into your piping, only about 1/8 inch in or so, just to help it spread out a little bit more. So now let's take this to the sewing machine and baste down our piping at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have that piping basted in place, isn't that cute? You can go ahead and trim down the top edges of your piping. So we know this is all going to be long enough now. Now take your lining flap piece and lay it right side down against the right side of the exterior flap. And that piping should just be smushed in between. Try to get it all lined up, and then add some clips here all the way around. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew along the clipped curved edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to leave the top edge open. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. You're going to want to use a zipper foot here so you can get as close as you can to the piping, and you don't want to sew on the piping. That's the one tricky thing about piping. You want to get really, really close to it so it has that really nice, just like crisp little line, but you don't want to sew over it. So let's take this to the sewing machine and sew it down. So now that we have the lining and the exterior sewn together, let's go ahead and clip little notches, or just, just cut into the seam allowance around all the curved parts about halfway through the seam. This will just help it spread out. If you have pinking shears, that's a great time to use them. Now turn the pocket right side out. Now you can grab your iron and press this with your iron if you'd like to get it nice and straight. But see how piping, it just adds a really cute decorative element to it. I do really, really like it. Okay, so if you didn't use piping, you're gonna wanna top stitch around this entire edge at 1/8 inch seam allowance. I'm actually going to still top stitch this, even though I did use piping. I like the look that the top stitching gives around the edge of this. So I'm gonna go around and top stitch on the fabric side at 1/8 inch seam allowance all the way around, and then I'm going to close up this open end as well at 1/8 inch seam allowance. So you can go ahead and put this flap to the side. All right, so now let's try this tongue lock flap. So I did not use this on my original bag when I used the turn lock, but I am going to use it with the tongue lock. I'm using waterproof canvas. This is the first time I'm doing it, so bear with me. Now I'm going to take my two pieces here and lay them right sides together. I think the point of this is to provide a little bit of reinforcement for that tongue lock. Since your tongue lock is pretty heavy and you're going to be installing it on maybe a lighter weight quilt cotton flap, so this should add just a little bit of beef to it. All right, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew along the sides and the curved bottom at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end, leave the top unsewn. All right, I have it sewn, and now I'm going to cut slits into all the rounded parts so that it spreads out, straightens out nicely. All right, I don't know about this, guys. Now we're gonna try to turn this out, right side out. Okay, this is as far as I got using the waterproof canvas before I said enough bad words that I decided we're not gonna use that. So instead, I cut out another couple pieces with the quilt cotton, and the quilt cotton was interfaced with woven interfacing. So I stitched that together, turned it right side out. Then you're just gonna fold down the open straight edges into one another, and you're folding it down 3/8 of an inch. All right, once you have that top edge folded in and as straight as you can get it, I don't think this is where my skills lie. Let's take this to the sewing machine, and we're gonna top stitch around all of the edges, including that folded over edge, to close it up and just keep it as straight as possible. This top edge here should be hidden by our tongue lock, but we still wanted to keep it as neat as possible. All right, so now we're going to attach this to our flap on the exterior side. So do your best to find the midpoint here. You might just want to press it with your fingers. There we go. And then we're just going to center this so that the circular part goes up towards the top and the straight part is along the bottom edge here, right by our piping. And let's just clip that in place. So this should be centered on the bottom on the exterior of your flap, just like this. So I know some of you guys are gonna ask about what if I wanted to use a magnetic snap. You could definitely do that, but you would want to install it before you close up this flap. So if I were doing a magnetic snap, again, you would have had to do this before you closed it all up. If you already closed it up, you can seam rip right here and then just slide your hand in and install the snap through the lining side right here. So I would install the thinner snap, so usually that's the male snap. I would install that on the back, on the lining side of your flap, and I would have it centered along the bottom and 1 inch up. So centered and 1 inch up, that'll bring it right about here. And that's where I would put my snap, and then when you're working on the pocket and on the other side, you're gonna have to readjust that as well. So I'm gonna go over kind of adjusting the measurements a little bit when I show you how to do the turn lock. Turn lock is coming in a little bit later, but you would do the same type of thing with a magnetic snap. So now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and sew along this bottom edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then at a 1/4 inch seam allowance to really hold this little tab in place. Okay, so now we have this on here. Now let's install the tongue portion of our tongue lock. So the bottom portion will be saved for later. Again, if you're doing a turn lock, don't worry yet, we'll get to that later. So the tongue portion is just gonna go right over all of that mess, if you can get it over. I'll be honest, I'm having some trouble getting this over these thick seams, so I'm just gonna press down with my little clamp here to try to thin it out a bit. I mean, it's good for it to be tight. You'd rather it to be tight rather than loose, but you gotta still get it on there. All right, there we go. So I got it on, and now I'm just sliding it around to get it perfectly centered. Okay, now for this, I'm going to mark the holes that are here on the back of my tongue piece. So I need to make some holes in here so that I can get my screws here. So I'm just going to mark just like that. Now I'm going to remove the tongue piece. Okay, I am going to use my rivet press hole punch for this. Just because the layers are so thick, I am worried about getting through all of it without hurting myself. So I'm just going to line this up and punch a hole right where my dots are marked. All right, that is some pretty thick fabric there. So I punched the holes using my rivet press, and now I'm just poking it out. They're not too big. I used a 2.5 millimeter hole punch, so they're fine. All right, so now I'm going to reinsert the tongue over that edge and line it up so that the holes I punched line up with the holes in the back here. So now I've got my screwdrivers. I have the teeny tiny screws that come with this and some glue. What we're gonna do is we're going to put some glue in these holes here on the back, and then we're going to screw in our screws. All right, so my screwdrivers are magnetized, so I can just kind of stick it on there and then put it in and screw it into place. Try not to push down too hard and start stripping your screw, just in case you don't have it exactly where you want it. If you strip your screw, you won't be able to get it out. All right, there we go. We have one installed. Like I said, if we're gonna do the turn lock, just hold off. We're gonna do that on a different flap, and we're gonna do it after we attach some pockets, because it's easier if we kind of do both of the male and female parts of the turn lock at the same time. So now take your flap and take your back exterior panel and lay them so that the exteriors are right sides together. So you should be seeing the top of the lining. I'm actually gonna go ahead and find the midpoint along these straight edge of our flap. This will just help me line it all up perfectly. So I have the midpoint marked on the top straight edge of my exterior panel and the midpoint marked on my flap. Exteriors right sides together. Line up that midpoint mark first. All right, let's go ahead and sew this in place at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have this done, go ahead and set this to the side. So first I'm going to show you how to install the rest of the tongue lock, and then we'll go over how to do the turn lock. So grab one of your pocket panels and lay it right side up. Take your template, and she has a marked line right here. It says mark this line. Go ahead and fold on that marked line. Okay, now line up your template on the bottom edge of your pocket on the right side. And I'm going to use chalk here for this, and I'm just going to make a chalk line right where I folded, just like that. And if you want, you can also fold this in half so that the sides come together, and you can find the midpoint exactly. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to pinch right at that marked chalk line, and right below the chalk line, I'm going to use my air erasing marker to make a little pink mark, just like that. All right, so now we have a white mark going across horizontally, and we have a little dot where the center is. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. You want the top edge of your lock to be along that line. So I know sometimes we're like, oh, we'll just put the prongs right on that line, but then this could be too tall. So my lock comes with this type of a washer, so I can install it in a lot of different ways. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to figure out, see if I install it just like this. Now this top edge of my washer is in the same spot as the top edge of my lock. So I can figure out how to mark this. So looking from the back, that's gonna be the second opening from the top short edge and the 6th opening. So that's what I need to mark. So I'm gonna take my washer and I'm going to center it, and I'm gonna line up the top short edge of my washer with my marked line. And then I'm gonna mark the 2nd opening and the 6th. Just like that. And those are the placements for the slits I need to make in order to install this. I know it's a little complicated, just bear with me. I would have a couple extra of these cuts done just in case. I have had to redo this pocket before. Go ahead and grab a scrap piece of fusible fleece or Decovil Light, whatever you're using, and mark those same spots using your washer on that scrap piece of interfacing. This is just gonna help provide some extra support for that lock. Okay, now take your seam ripper and just rip along the lines on your interfacing, and then rip along those marked lines on your exterior pocket panel. So now you can take your lock, insert those prongs into the marks. There we go. And when you insert it, you should see that the top is lined up with the top line that you marked with chalk, and it should be centered and for the most part straight. Now flip it over, take your interfacing scrap, insert that over the prongs, then take your washer, insert that over as well, and then just close the prongs. Now just to be safe, it's good to grab another piece of interfacing and cover the back of those prongs. I'm going to use glue to hold this in place. All right, so I can just place it over there, glued down. There we go. It's kind of a mess on the back. That's fine. We just want this to be supported, that's all. There we go. Okay, so now you have your lock installed. So when we sew this onto the other side, on the front of our bag, this will just come around and lock in just like that. See? Okay, so let's go over the turn lock now. So here's another bag I'm currently working on. You can see I have the flap already attached to the back, and I don't have anything attached up front here. I don't have my lock attached. This is the turn lock I'm going to be using. I have this bottom piece here that turns. That's going to be installed on the pocket. And then this opening piece is going to be installed on the flap. Now, for this opening piece, we actually have to cut a hole through the entire flap. We have to cut a hole through the exterior and the lining of the flap for this to work. But for the bottom piece, we only want it to go through one layer of the pocket, just like we did with the tongue lock. So here is my exterior unit with the flap. We're going to install this piece on it later. We're going to install it on the pocket first, attach the pocket, and then we'll know exactly where we want to install this on the flap. So go ahead and take that piece and the flap and move it to the side. So for my lock, I want the top of this piece to be 1 inch or more down from the top edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my pocket piece that I'm going to be attaching my lock to in half, and I'm just going to pinch the midpoint and snip it with some scissors so it's easy to see. And then I'm going to measure 1 inch down from that edge, and I'm going to use my chalk here to mark a line. There we go. You could also use your pattern piece here to mark that line. Either one will work. So this part gets a little bit trickier because I don't have the same type of washer that I had with the tongue lock, which would allow me to line this really easily. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, this top edge here is going to be 1 inch down from here. So I have to figure out how to place my washer. So I'm going to measure from my prongs up to the top edge of my lock, and that's 3/8 of an inch, okay? So I'm going to go down 3/8 of an inch from this marked line, and I'm keeping it centered on that midpoint as well. And that is where I'm going to place my washer so that I have this set up properly. Now, none of this has to be terribly exact. You're going to be able to kind of finagle it later, but you want to get it pretty good. So there we go. So now I have my washer where I want it. I'm going to grab my fabric marking pen and I'm going to mark the spots for my prongs. Now you're going to want to make sure you know which spots you're going to mark. So for example, on this one, they're a little off center. So take the time to figure out exactly how to get this centered up. Okay, now I'm going to take my seam ripper and rip the slits right there on the pocket. And then I can insert this into there. There we go. So it's a little bit lower than my marked line. That's okay. When I install this later, it will still be fine. There we go. See, the thing is because we're installing this part higher up on our flap, we need to install this other part higher up on the pocket, or we need to move our pocket. So, for example, on this version right here, the lock is below the edge of the flap, but for this, we have to be in the flap. So we kind of have to adjust where we're putting everything, which is where a lot of trial and error is going to come in. But if you kind of eyeball it, go slowly, you should be okay. Okay, so just like we did with the other lock, we're going to add some fusible fleece behind it and then over when we're done. So I'll just use my washer to mark those spots on my fusible fleece. So then I'll add my fusible fleece scrap over my prongs, and then I'll add my washer. And then I'll take another piece of scrap here, add some glue to the back of it, and then just glue that onto the back of my prongs. There we go. That way it's nice and secure. I don't have to worry about anything ripping. And there we go. This piece is ready to go. And like I said, I will show you how to attach the other piece once we get this pocket installed, and then we can figure out placement for exactly how high or low this needs to go. If you're using a magnetic snap here, I would install the female end on this piece here about 1 inch down, just like before. You don't want to get it up higher than 1 inch because you will have to fold this and sew this later. So I would go 1 inch down and install the female side of my magnetic snap through this piece. Okay, now regardless of which type of lock you're using, let's finish up this front pocket. So take your other piece of your front pocket and lay your front pocket pieces right sides together, and then just clip in place, lining up all of the edges. Once you've got it all clipped, mark yourself a 2.5 inch opening along the top straight edge. So now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along all of the edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Start and stop at these marked edges so you're leaving this opening here, and make sure you backstitch really well at both of those markings. All right, once you have those sewn together, go ahead and clip down the corners and then cut little notches around the curved corners on the bottom. And then we can just turn this out, right side out. All right, once you have it turned out, which you guys don't use waterproof canvas for this. This is hurting my hands. I should not have used waterproof canvas. You can iron this around the edges to get it nice and flat. And then you're gonna wanna fold down those top raw edges that were in the hole that you left and get that as straight as possible. I want the whole top edge to be nice and straight, and then just clip it. Okay, now let's go top stitch along this top edge right here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is gonna close up that hole. So now we're going to attach our little front pocket to our exterior front panel. Now in the directions, she's gonna have you install this 1 inch from the bottom edge, just like that, which is gonna work out great with our strap. See? Just like this. This is going to be a little bit bulky on the sides. It doesn't go flush against it. It bulks out a little bit, so that's gonna be perfect. If you're using magnetic snaps, I want you to kind of eyeball this. I want you to maybe make your pocket 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 of an inch higher, so that way this snap right here goes over the snap on the bottom. You know what I mean? You don't want this pocket to be too low and then your bag ends up kind of pulling like this. So do your best to kind of eyeball. You have a lot of wiggle room here. It's okay if it's not in the exact right spot, but figure out exactly where you want your magnetic snaps to go together before you stitch on your pocket. On my other bag, I'm still not addressing the open lock yet. I'm gonna wait until I sew the exterior completely before I do that. So I just marked the midpoint on the bottom of my exterior panel and then on the bottom of my pocket panel. And so I'm just gonna measure up 1 inch from the bottom, line up those midpoints, and place like that. If you're using all quill cotton here, you can use some pins here to hold this in place. You could also use some masking tape, which is what I'm going to use. All right, so the masking tape is just to hold it in place temporarily. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the edges and the bottom, and we're going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you use any tape, just make sure you move it out of the way before you sew over it. All right, isn't that cute? This is gonna be such a darling bag. Look at that, isn't that pretty? Okay, so now you can put this to the side and we're gonna work on the phone pocket. So this pocket is optional, but it is a nice little addition in the lining. These are the panels for the phone pocket. This is very simple. It's just a very basic top stitched slip pocket. So we're gonna take our 2 pieces and lay them right sides together and then just clip around all the edges. Okay, so now mark a 2.5 inch opening on the bottom. If you're using firmer fabric like I am, you might wanna make it a 3 inch opening just to make it easier to turn out. And now we're gonna sew around all the edges at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just leave that opening on the bottom unsewn. Make sure you backstitch at both of the marks. All right, once you have these sewn together, let's just cut off the corners on all 4 corners. And then you can take your pocket and turn it right side out. All right, once you have it all turned right side out, you can take an iron and press this to get it nice and flat. Since I'm using this waterproof canvas, it's just easier to use clips. And then you're gonna fold down that open edge to get it as straight as possible. So here we go. So just kind of roll it and move it around to get it the way you want it. Now that open edge is actually going to be the bottom of the pocket, so we don't really have to see it. Now the top edge should be the short edge that does not have an opening. We're going to top stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance right along that edge. Now grab one of your main body lining pieces and find the midpoint along the bottom edge. You can find the midpoint along the bottom edge of your pocket as well. Now you want to line up your pocket 5/8 of an inch above that bottom edge and centered. So just use those midpoint marks in your ruler to get it all lined up nice and straight and centered. Just like before, I'm going to use masking tape here to hold it all in place. Okay, now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the sides and the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This will also close up that hole in the bottom. Okay, so now let's make our strap connectors. First, we're gonna fold these in half, wrong sides together, long sides together. There you go. And you can just press, you can press this with an iron to get that midpoint crease, or you can press it with your fingers. Do the same on the other one. Okay, after you have them pressed in half, then take one edge and press it down, wrong sides together. So this is one of the shorter edges. And you're pressing it down about 3/8 of an inch. I just eyeball it, honestly. And then fold those long raw edges up to meet the midpoint that you made when you folded it in half, hot dog style. And then you can press this with an iron, or you can use clips here to hold it all together. So once you have it all together, you should have one short edge folded in so there's no raw edge there. the long edge is folded in and then the other short edge is still a raw edge. That's fine. Go ahead and repeat that with your other tab. Okay, once you have this folded like this, what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to top stitch this folded edge. She has you top stitching it with it open. I'm gonna top stitch it with it all folded like this, just because it's a little bit easier for me to tuck in everything the way I want it and get it nice and clean. So we're gonna top stitch along the folded short edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Don't worry about the long edges yet. All right, once you have these prepped, grab one of your exterior side panels and we're gonna find the center of the top short edge and we're gonna measure down 2 3/8 of an inch and mark a line. Now take your strap tab and lay it wrong side up, so those raw edges should be showing. Wrong side up, and the raw edge should line up with that marked line, and then the strap is just gonna point up. So the folded top stitch part is up top. Just line this up and get it as centered as possible. And once you have it all lined up, measure from the bottom raw edge 3/4 of an inch and just mark it on the very sides of your side tab. We're gonna sew a little box and this will help us make sure we get it as straight as possible. Okay, now take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along this bottom part right here. We're gonna make a 3/4 of an inch box. So we're gonna go along the bottom edge, tucking in these folded sides, up the fold on the side, across, and then back down. If you're not using any sort of rivets, you might wanna make an X to go across this as well, just to reinforce it. All right, once you have that stitched in place, grab your D-ring, or for me it's this triangle ring, and insert the edge of your strap into the ring, and then we're just gonna fold it down. Now I'm gonna have that folded top edge go down just a little bit past the bottom that I just stitched on, because the bottom right here, these are raw edges, right? And I wanna cover that up. So I'm just going to keep it nice and straight, bring it down to meet that bottom edge, and then I'm just gonna have it go over just a scotch, just a little bit. Now I'm just gonna use a piece of tape to hold this in place until I get to the sewing machine. There we go. And now we're gonna go and sew another 3/4 of an inch rectangle here. Honestly, I'm just gonna sew along the bottom edge and then the sides and then up close to the D-ring and then back down the other side at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that stitched in place, if you're not using rivets, you can make another X here. If you are using rivets, grab your rivet press and let's just punch a hole right in the center of our rectangle. Go ahead and grab one of your rivets, insert it through that hole. Now all we have to do is press this down. And there you go. Now you have your strap tab attached to one side. Now you can go ahead and repeat this exact same process with your other tab and side panel. All right, there we go. Now you have both of your D-rings attached. Isn't that cute? Okay, so let's go ahead and just finish building the side. So keep your side panels out and then grab your bottom panel. Take your bottom panel and lay it right sides together along the bottom of one of your side panels. And then you can just clip these together to hold in place. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance right along this clipped edge. Once you have those sewn together, fold your bottom panel down so that the seam is behind the bottom panel. You can use an iron here to press this or just use your fingers. And now take this back to the sewing machine and top stitch along the seam on the bottom panel. So that should be holding the seam behind it. There we go. Now let's do the same thing with the other side panel. So on the opposite side of the bottom panel, get the bottom of your side panel and lay them right sides together. Clip in place to hold. And then sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that on, once again, just press the seam so it's behind the bottom panel. And then we can top stitch along the seam on the bottom panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now grab your exterior front panel, and if you haven't already, mark the midpoint along the bottom edge. Grab your bottom and side panel unit you just built, and let's mark the midpoint along the bottom of this on both sides. Okay, now take your bottom panel and lay it right sides together, matching up the midpoints with the bottom midpoint on your front exterior panel. Put a clip right there to hold it in place. Now take the left side, pull it all the way up to the top, and line up those top corners. There we go. Now take the other side, the right side, and do the same thing. Line it up at the top, corner to corner. And now we're just gonna clip along the side and the curve. So I like to start clipping along the straight part of the side first. I do a few clips here, and then I go to the bottom and I clip along the straight part of the bottom. And then once I get to that curve, then I'll start kind of adjusting a little bit. And if you need to cut any slits on either of these panels to get this to fit properly, that's fine. So I just kind of do like a bowl shape here. I just tuck in that exterior panel into the side panel curve, just like that. There we go. Like a bowl. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It might be easier for you to sew if you have the back of the side panel up. Don't be afraid to clip into the curves a little bit to get everything to spread out. I like to use a stiletto and I go very, very slowly. Alright, I sewed that with the wrong side of the front panel up, and just to see if it was easier, it is not. It is easier to sew with the wrong side of the side panels up, but I'm just going to turn this out real quick to make sure it looks okay. That is all fine. So I would suggest going over this a second time. You can go right over those stitches, or you can go just a scotch into the seam to stiffen it up a little bit. If you're using vinyl, definitely you want to go over this a second time. So I'm going to run this under the machine one more time just to strengthen those stitches. All right, now we're going to do the same thing to attach this to the other panel. So flip that flap over just like that. Let's find the midpoint on the bottom of our back panel. You should already have the midpoint marked on the opposite raw edge of your bottom panel. So let's line up right sides together, the bottom panel and the back panel. Let's do the midpoint first. Line up the top corner of your side panel with the back top corner and add a clip. Do the same thing with the other side. The side panel top corner goes to the top corner of the back exterior. And then just clip along the sides and going around that curve just like we did on the front. Okay, now let's go sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have it all sewn together, you can turn this right side out. Isn't it cute? Oh, this is such a fun little bag, guys. Look at that. Look how darling that is. Oh. Okay, so now let's talk about if you were using the turn lock, how we're going to install that. So here is our other bag that we're using with the turn lock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it down to figure out placement. Now, I'm essentially just eyeballing this. So when I'm looking at this, I'm folding it down to look the way I want it to look in the end. And then I'm just gonna look on the side and kind of eyeball where the placement is. I'm gonna make sure it's centered on this front panel. But what I'm trying to figure out is how high I want this to go. Again, it doesn't have to be totally perfect. So I'm just kind of moving it around. Guys, this is what I do. I mean, there's probably better ways to do this, but this is what I do. So I'm pretty much just putting my finger underneath. I'm touching where the turn lock is. I'm putting my finger underneath, and that's about where it is, right there. Now I'm gonna grab my chalk. I know some of you guys are cringing, and I'm just gonna place it, make like a little X, just so I have a general idea of where I want this to go. I'm using chalk because I can just easily wipe that off. Okay, so I'm gonna put this as low as I can get it. So it's going to be above the top stitching, but it's going to be centered and above the top stitching. And that way I have a nice fold up here too. I don't want it to kind of tug down like that. You know, I want it to have this nice fold up here. So it's a boxy shape. So I'm going to find the center along this bottom edge just by folding like I always do. And I can just pinch this with my fingers because I'm using Decovil Light for this one. But I can also use chalk. And now I'm gonna unscrew my opening piece, because this is actually 2 pieces screwed together already. So what I need to do is I need to screw them around a cut hole in my flap. Now I know this gets a little scary because you're worried you're gonna cut your hole too big and then this thing is just gonna fall through it. I know, I'm the same way. So I will show you what I do. I'm gonna take them apart and I'm gonna take the back part. So the back part is the flat part. And I'm just going to center it over my midpoint line. So I have the midpoint hole right here. And I want it to just be a bit above my top stitching, maybe a 1/4 inch above my top stitching. And then honestly, I'm just eyeballing it. There we go. Now I'm going to take this silver pen here and I'm going to trace the inside of my design. I'm going to trace where the holes are. So now I can't just cut out this inside design and these holes. I need to cut out kind of a big old mess here in order to make this work. But I don't want it to be bigger than this circle, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna grab my seam ripper and I'm just gonna cut right in the center of that little castle printout. Smaller scissors might be more helpful here. And now I'm just going to cut around the castle and the little dots. And I'm cutting through the exterior and the lining. It's always good to start out with a smaller cut than you need, and then we can widen it a little bit and figure out places we need it to be bigger, because we want it to be just big enough. All right, so there's my kind of wonky cutout. Now I'm going to take the front piece and I'm just going to see if I can kind of shove it in there, flip it back. So now you can see here where everything's going to go. So I can see that I need to cut just a little bit more out here on the left. And I just cut the smallest bits at a time. So I'm gonna put it back in, flip it up. Oh, almost there. Just again, a little bit more in this bottom corner here. So once you got it the way you want it, flip it over, lay the washer over the back. Make sure you're tucking down any fabric that's poking through. Grab your screws and a screwdriver. And I'm just going to screw them all into place once first, gently, not all the way, not super tight, just enough to get it in there so we can arrange everything the way we want. And then we'll add some glue. All right, so let's take a look at it. I don't see any threads poking through, that's good. When we pull it over, it'll line up just like that. That looks great. I think that's going to work perfect. It leaves a little bit more extra, so if it's a lot of stuff in there, it'll still spread out and won't tug on it too much. That's perfect. And that's how you do it. I know that it's kind of like not exact, but when it comes to these types of turn locks, because there's so many different sizes and shapes, you really just kind of have to test it out and place it uniquely for you. So let's go ahead and just glue in these screws. So I'm just going to remove one screw at a time, add some glue, and then re-screw it. That way I don't have to worry about all of this moving around on me. And there we go. That's how you install your turn lock. So now let's go back to our original bag and finish up the lining. So grab your 2 lining side panels and your lining bottom panel. And along the bottom edge of a side panel, lay your bottom panel right sides together. And now we can sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have these sewn together, just flip the bottom panel over so that the seam is behind it. And then we're going to top stitch along this edge on the bottom panel at a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now let's just do the same thing with the other side. Take your remaining side panel and lay it right sides down against the other bottom edge. Clip together and sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then fold the seam behind the bottom panel. And we'll top stitch along the bottom panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now we can build the lining the same way we built the exterior. So let's find the midpoints along the bottom edge of our side and bottom combo, and then find the midpoint along the bottom edges of your lining main panels. Now let's start with our lining panel that has the phone pocket. Lay that right side up. Take your bottom panel and lay it right side down, matching up those midpoints. Clip together at the midpoint. Take the top left corner of your side panel and lay it right sides together with the top left corner of your main lining panel. Do the same thing on the right side. And then we're just gonna clip along the edges in the rounded cornered bottom. Okay, now sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have one side attached, we're gonna do the same thing with the other side. So let's match up the midpoints on the bottom first, and then match up the top corners, and then just clip along the entire edge. All right, this time though, we wanna leave an opening when we sew this together. So I'm actually gonna leave an opening on the side because I feel like it's just a little bit easier to turn that way. So you wanna leave an opening that's between 5 and 6 inches. If you're using heavier fabric, go towards 6 inches, but if you're using fabric like quilt cotton and canvas like I am, 5 inches should be fine. Okay, once again, let's sew along the pinned edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but this time just leave this opening between your 2 marked lines unsewn, backstitch well on both spots. Okay, as you can see, I'm a lot clumsier when I'm sewing the curves with lining. I'm okay if there's some pleats and some folds. That doesn't bother me. As long as it's all closed, that's what matters to me. Time to finish it up. Look how cute this is. So, open up your flap so it's back just like that. Your exterior should be right side out. Your lining should be wrong side out. We're going to insert our exterior into our lining, and we want the lining part of the flap to go up against that phone pocket. So the front pocket of our exterior panel is going to go against the lining piece that doesn't have anything against it at all. And we're just going to push it in there. If you have these D-rings, make sure they're folded down, not up. We don't want to accidentally sew over those. All right, once you have it all in there, line up the seams on the sides. So I usually like to fold them in opposite directions. I'll take the lining seam and fold it to the right. I'll take the exterior seam and fold it to the left. And then I'll just smush them together so they're giving each other a little hug. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, once you have the seams clipped, now just kind of pull along these straight edges and clip together. Remember, all of your fabric, your lining and your exterior should be right sides together. You may find the side over here that has the flap and the handle is a little bulky. This is where if you need to, go ahead and switch to a 90-14 needle to get through all that bulk. You also might want to increase the tension on your sewing machine if you're finding you're having some kind of weird looping on the back of your fabric. All right, now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I like to sew from the inside of the bag. Honestly, that to me is the most challenging part because it is such a tight little circle, and you have this desire to keep it all nice and round and flat as you go around, but really you gotta just smush it. Don't worry about creasing it. You'll iron it later. It's fine. If you're using lightweight fabric, it's easiest. If you're using vinyl here, that step is pretty challenging. So whichever one you chose, congratulations, you did a great job. Now let's turn this right side out. So with that side hole, it makes it pretty easy to just pull this through. All right, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to pull the exterior into the lining. There we go, and I have my flap up just like that. And now what I can do is I can put my hand in through that hole in the lining and smooth out this top seam really nice. And I like to just poke it with my fingers like that, and then add clips to keep it nice and straight. So I'm gonna do this around the entire edge on the top. Remember, I have my exterior on the inside. You could also do this with the exterior on the outside. You'll just wanna take off the table on your sewing machine. So if you have an extension table on your sewing machine, you'll want to take that off so that you can wrap this around just the arm of your sewing machine. But just in case you can't take your table off, this is another way to do it where you can top stitch from the inside of the bag on a flat surface. All right, if you have any seams that are really bulky, especially if you're using vinyl, you can take your little key fob press here and just press down those seams to get them nice and flat. Alrighty, let's take this to the sewing machine. We're gonna top stitch. I'm gonna top stitch from the inside 1/4 inch away the entire top seam over the flap as well. So the flap will be out like this and we'll top stitch over, flap and handle up, top stitch on the outer panel below it. Once you have that top stitch, you can pull out your exterior fabric, just like that. And put your hand inside to help poke out the bottom really well. There we go. All right, and then we're going to close up this hole on the side of our lining. So what you can do is just kind of tug on the corners and you'll see the fabric kind of wants to fold down on itself. I just pull on it, let it fold down, and then add some clips to hold it in place. I'm not that precise about making sure it's 1/4 inch. Okay, now let's top stitch this hole closed at 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now just take your lining and push it into the center of your bag. All right, there you go. Now you can just close it up. And there's your bag. If you need to give it a little press, go ahead and do that. But this is just so adorable, isn't it? All right, now let's just make the strap and then we're done. So I have one nice long strap piece using waterproof canvas. But I didn't have one piece that was long enough from my quilt cotton, so I cut 2 pieces, and I'm just gonna sew these together, and then I'll trim it down to size. So I have both of my quilt cotton pieces already interfaced with woven interfacing to make them nice and sturdy. I'm just gonna take 2 of them and lay them perpendicular to one another, right sides together. And then I'm gonna draw a diagonal line going from the top corner on the left side of my top piece down to the bottom corner on my bottom piece, just like that. Now I'm gonna go to the sewing machine and just sew along that drawn line. Okay, once you have that sewn, you can clip off the triangle just like that. So we leave about 1/4 inch seam allowance away from the stitches. And then you're just going to press this open. Now you can press this with an iron or finger press it. Here we go. I'm gonna press the seam open on the back. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch along both edges of my seam. So I'm gonna be holding both sides of the seam allowance down with 1/8 inch top stitch. So ideally your strap is going to be about 60 inches long before we do anything with it. If it's a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, that's fine. I like one of my straps to be a little bit longer than the other, and I'll show you why. And then I make them both the same width. So both of my straps are 2 inches wide and about 60 inches long. This one is much longer than 60 inches and I want that. So this one would be closer to like 64 inches and then this one would be 60 inches. So we can prepare the quilt cotton strap first. On the back side of my quilt cotton strap, I'm just going to mark a 1 inch line along the entire length. So I'm just marking the midpoint. I don't really want to fold it. You could if you wanted to, that's fine. But I want to keep that pretty flat, so I'm just going to mark it with my air erasing marker. So once you have that midpoint marked, let's just fold the edges, wrong sides together, up to meet that midpoint mark, and just press with your iron all the way down your strap. Once you have one side folded in, go ahead and repeat that for the other long side. All right, this part of the strap is done. Now let's finish the other strap. So for the other strap, since I'm using this waterproof canvas, I'm not going to use the iron. I am going to mark the midpoint, so 1 inch in, just like I did on the quilt cotton with a marking tool. I'm going to go down the entire length of the strap, marking the midpoint on the back of the strap. And now I'm going to fold up the long edges, wrong sides together to meet that midpoint mark, and I'm going to use clips along the entire length of the strap. Do this for both of the long edges. Okay, once you have both of your straps folded in and pressed or clipped, we're gonna combine them so that the wrong sides, the sides that have the raw edges, are smooshed together just like this. Now you could use double-sided tape here, especially if you pressed both of these with an iron and they're staying. But if you already have clips on one of them, we can just include them in the clips. So the strap that's longer, I'm going to take the short edge, fold it in anywhere from 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch, wrong sides together just to hide that raw edge, and then refold just like that. Now I'm going to take my other strap and lay it wrong sides together, so down on top. And I'm gonna have my strap that has the folded edge overhang anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to an inch, just like that. And then I'm just gonna fold it over. So the raw edges on my waterproof canvas strap are tucked in to the quilt cotton strap over here on the edge. And the quilt cotton strap has its short raw edges already tucked in, just like that. And then I'm gonna clip it in place. And now I'm just gonna go along this entire strap, clipping both of my pieces of the strap wrong sides together so that it looks like this. One side is fabric, one side is waterproof canvas. Okay, like I said, my quilt cotton strap ended up being quite a bit longer than my waterproof canvas strap. I'm going to cut down my quilt cotton strap so it is 1.5 inches hanging off. That will give me enough fabric to work with. So now I'm just gonna fold down the short raw edges of the quilt cotton strap, about 3/8 of an inch, and then I'll refold in towards the center. And then I can fold over this quilt cotton strap to wrap around the raw edge of my waterproof canvas and just clip in place. Okay, now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and top stitch around all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm also going to add an extra top stitching around the bottom edge of the fold over part on my quilt cotton strap. All right, to finish up the bag, I'm just gonna use some rivets. So figure out which side is your right side, wrong side. Which side do you want to be the most noticeable? I think I'm gonna have the pale pink side be the outer part and then the fabric be the inner part. So grab your strap slider and take it so that the whatever is the back side is gonna go up facing the middle bar, over it, and then back down. And you only need it to overhang 1 inch or so. So for me, that fold over on that tab is perfect because that's exactly how far I need it to go. If you're using a sewing machine, go ahead and sew on this little rectangle here, maybe do an X as well. If you're gonna be using rivets, then just grab your rivet press and poke a hole right in the center. I'm gonna take a rivet and just add it in there for now, and then I will press it down in just a moment. So now straighten out your strap. Take one of your swivel hooks and put it on your strap so that the swivel part is on the right side of the strap. So remember I said that this right here, this pale pink, is going to be the right side. So the swivel is on the right side. And now pull your strap through it. Keep your strap as straight as possible. Insert the end of your strap up through your slider. Give it some good slack. And then insert it into the other side. So you should have one end here, that's just the end of the strap, your slider's in the middle, and then on the very end is your swivel hook. Okay, so now let's add the other swivel hook. So insert the swivel hook so that the swivel is on the right side of your strap, and then just fold down the end of your strap. Again, because I have that fold over with my fabric, it's just the perfect amount. I'm gonna punch a hole right in the middle of my rectangle, and then I will insert my snap and just snap it together to hold it in place. Now I'm going to insert the dies for my rivets, and I can just press these down. So I have one on the end of the strap, and then I'll kind of have to move the straps out of the way, but then I have another rivet here right by the slider. There we go. Isn't that a fun strap? I love that, where it's like, oh, just a strap, and then a little peak of color right there. You can grab our bag and attach it. Oh, that's so cute. This is such a cute bag. Look at that. Adorable. All right, what did you think? Did you get through it? I'm telling you, I really think the top stitching is the most difficult part of the bag. I actually think the curves on the bottom are easier than the top stitching in the end because it's just a narrow hole. But how'd you do? Let me know. Look how cute this is. I love that with the fusible fleece, it's squishy. And with the canvas too, it's not really gonna wrinkle. So this is what I see, a little kid with their stuffy or a doll and all the accessories that they need to go with their items, and then they just put it in here, and then if it gets scrunched up, you know, pushed on the floor of the car because that's where it all ends up, right? Or if it gets pushed into a backpack or something, you can just pop it out and it's fine. It is so cute. So it's one of those bags, perfect for the kids in your life, perfect for the grown-ups in your life. This version, we use the fusible fleece, but remember we were working on this one alongside it, and we used that Decoville light. Now, I do really like the structure of the Decoville light. It's a lot lighter than like this one or the vinyl one. This is probably the lightest option, but this is one of those bags where if it gets squished up a lot, it's really gonna show all those creases. So I would say this is probably more big kid, adult friendly because it needs to be kind of better taken care of. But this one has the turn lock, which, you know, I'm a big fan of. Honestly, I can't decide. I like them both a lot. And now I really want to make one with magnetic snaps, and I really want to make one with some cam snaps. I would say the tongue lock is probably easier to install than the turn lock. But both are great options. Again, use what you have. Use what you have. You don't have to go purchase a bunch of stuff to make this bag. Use whatever you have. You know, honestly, especially if you're making this for a kid, now I don't know, I haven't tried this, but you could probably do some sew on Velcro here and just sew on a patch of Velcro here, top stitch on a patch of Velcro up here, and that would also be a really good option, especially for the little ones. So thank you so much for sewing along with me today. As always, thank you, Vivi, for allowing me to film these tutorials. I hope you love this bag. Like I said, it's actually my everyday bag now. I absolutely love the size of it. I love that I'm not carrying around a whole bunch of stuff, but it does hold the things I need. If you make this bag, make sure you leave a comment down below and tell me how you like it. If you post any of your items on social media, please make sure you tag me. I'm at OklaRoots. You can also use the hashtag OklaRootsTuts, and I will be checking that out. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye.